In this video, we will cover the common CDP commands and how it can be used for understanding how things are connected even if you do not have a network diagram. CDP is enabled by default and it has many commands that we can use to view information of the connected devices. So doing a show CDP question mark, we can view what options we can use with CDP. Some of these options include interface to looking at the CDP neighbor entries to the traffic, or just typing in show CDP by itself. So using the command show CDP by itself, we can view general CDP details such as when CDP packets are sent. So CDP is sent every 60 seconds or every 1 minute, and the hold time value is 180 seconds, which means if we disable CDP on an interface or at the global configuration, it will take 180 seconds for those entries to be cleared out. We also see the version of the CDP advertisements, which is version 2, which is enabled. So this is some of the things we can look at under the show CDP command. But the best command to use is show CDP neighbor, where we can view all connected devices to R1, for example. So here's what we see. Now, based on our network diagram, we know that R1 is connecting to R2 and to R3. We also see the interfaces that are used, including the IP addresses that are used. So this is good information. But if we do not have a network diagram, then the command show CDP neighbors can provide us those details to potentially construct a network diagram of our own. Now within this command here, you see the device ID, which is reflecting the host name of those devices. So there we see R2 and R3 that we do expect to be connected. Next we see the local interface, and these are the local interfaces on our router of R1. So we see that the local interface of serial 0/0, which is right here, is connected to R2, which is definitely the case. Next we see things like the capability of this device, which has a code of R, S, and an I. And you can view these codes right up here under capability codes, where R2 has routing and switch capabilities. Next we see the platform, which is the Cisco 2691 model, which is what R2 is. And we see the port ID, which says serial 0/0. This is the port on R2 that's connecting to R1. So this is a great command that we can use for viewing all connected neighbors, the interfaces that are used, even the model number. And we see the same thing for R3, the same general principle of how to read this table and how to construct your own network diagram. So I use this command a lot for building my own network diagrams. So take advantage of this command and for building and understanding how things are connected. But there's also a better command that we can do by adding the syntax detail after the command show CDP neighbors, where we can view details of our connected devices on R1. So here, for example, we see the entries of R2 and R3. Let's focus on R2 for a moment. So here we see more information such as the IP address that is configured on R2 off of its interface of serial 0/0. So the IP here reflects 10.1.2.2, which is correct and is shown here. Of course, we see other details of the iOS version that is running on this router. So you can tell there's a lot of valuable information we can get from using the details command, where we can know the IP address, including the iOS version that we can include with our documentation or our network diagram. Using the command show CDP traffic, we can view the amount of CDP advertisements being sent and being received. So we see that reflected here in the first line as total packets output and input. Now you also see the amount of errors that can be received, whether it's fragmented errors, invalid packets, or no memory errors. And you also see the CDP version that is enabled and the advertisements being sent out or was coming in. Now the default is version 2 that you saw under the command show CDP, and you see that should be the same details listed up here as well. So we have 22 output packets and 8 input packets, which should be the same details here. Just keep that in mind. But this is a great command to also use for troubleshooting CDP to confirm, are you sending out CDP packets and are you receiving CDP packets? So this is the best command to definitely use. In this video, we will show you how to disable CDP at a global level and on an interface level, including what happens when it is removed. As a recap, let's view some of the CDP commands on R1. So show CDP by itself will give global information on when packets are sent and the hold time value. And the other command, which is very valuable, is the command show CDP neighbors. This will provide details of what is connected to R1, followed by the interfaces, the capability, even the platform. Let's do the same on R2, which will show similar results. Here we see that R2 is connecting to R1, which is expected. We see it's connecting to R1 through its local interface of serial 0/0, connecting to R1's 0/0, which is reflected under the port ID. We see that the model number for R1 is the Cisco 2691, and that it has the routing and switching capabilities. Now we will disable CDP globally in R2, and let's see what happens. Now let's use the CDP neighbor command, and we'll see the following. We will see that CDP is now disabled on R2. Now let's go to R1 to see what the CDP neighbor command shows. So you notice that R2 is still listed here because the hold time reflects 122 seconds. That's the key thing to remember. So going back, the number decreases. So now it's 120 seconds. Now remember, under the show CDP command that we talked about before, that the total hold time value is 180 seconds. So after 180 seconds, this entry will expire. So far we're at 120 seconds. So we got some time before that clears up. Now it's at 110 seconds. So we're going to run through this command a couple of times, but look at the hold time value and see it start to decrease. Now it's at 100 seconds. Let's wait a little bit longer, and then we're going to try this command again. Now we're at 86 seconds. Now we're at 72 seconds. But you notice something else. You notice that for the R3 entry, the number increased. Before, you saw 141 seconds. You saw 126. Then you see 173. It increased. Why is that? It increased because R1 received a CDP packet, which is sent every 60 seconds from R3. Therefore, it resets the counter for the hold time back to 180 seconds. Well, R2, CDP is disabled, so it would never send a CDP packet to R1. Therefore, the hold time will continue to count down until it expires. While we wait for the hold time to expire for R2, we're going to do something else in terms of disabling CDP, but on an interface level. Let's go under the configuration mode, then to that serial interface connecting to R3. Now before we do that, let's go to R3 and look at the CDP neighbors. This will be very similar to other results. So we know that R3 is connecting to R1. We see the interfaces, the model number, pretty much the same thing that we saw on R2. Now let's go back to R1 and disable CDP on the WAN interface connecting to R3. Next, let's go back and do a show CDP neighbor command. And here we see that our countdown is still decreasing for R2, so that's still we're almost there, which is great. But the R3 entry is still there because it's going to take time for that to expire. Let's go to R3 to see what the CDP command displays once we disabled it under the interface on R1. So we see that it's still there because CDP is still enabled globally, but only disabled on the interface on R1. So it's going to take time for the hold time to expire. So now let's go back to R1 and let's wait for the R2 neighbor details to clear out, to expire. And we're almost there. We're at 20 seconds. Let's do it again. We're at 11 seconds. You also notice the hold time decreasing for R3. Now we're at 0. So now, pretty soon, okay, now R2 has been removed from our CDP table. So that's how the process works for the whole time. And it's good to see that basically in this example. Now it's going to take a while for the CDP neighbors to expire in R3 and R1 based on the hold time. So here in R3 we have 104 seconds. So we have some time for that expires. But it's going to do the exact same thing. So now let's go ahead and let's go to R2. And R2, let's enable CDP globally again. Next, let's use the CDP commands to see what happens. Okay, nothing yet. Let's wait. Let's try it again. And now we have our entry returned, connecting to R1. So that's kind of how you can get comfortable and familiar with how things work in terms of the CDP commands and how they're configured and how they expire in the environment though. And again in R3, that's going to continue to count down until the whole time expires, which is going to be about 50 seconds.